Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here today with you. My name is David Harris. I am a partner at White Hack Labs, and I'm also an attorney in Florida. Today, we are very excited to speak with you about hacks in the wild and how you can protect your company from modern threats in the digital universe. My goal is to provide you with a basic overview of ethical hacking, how it can help your company, and how the services our company can offer you today. We also have a featured topic on WordPress vulnerability to discuss with you and a special guest presentation. Before we dive into the specifics, I'd like to talk a little bit about why we started this webinar and why we chose to raise awareness about cybersecurity in general. Let's look at a few data breaches that happened in 2023. Lots of familiar names here. Let's discuss two of these cases. First, Progress MoveIt. One of the biggest attacks of 2023 was a compromised version of Progress MoveIt software that was used by over 2,600 companies, including U.S. government agencies and contractors. Progress MoveIt is software that helps companies transfer data between servers. In this case, hackers penetrated the system of software company Progress, and they were able to create a malicious version of MoveIt software that spread to all of its clients. As a result, the hackers were able to gain access to all of the customer admin controls. This type of attack is called a supply chain attack that first gained notoriety with the SolarWinds hack of 2020. Now let's talk about example 2. Let's talk about the Indian Council of Medical Research compromise that took place in October 2023. In that case, at the Indian Council, there occurred a breach by hackers who leaked the individual passport and personal background information of victims, including names, addresses, and telephone numbers. This was India's biggest data breach, with over 815 million people and their records leaked to the public, resulting in millions of people having their confidential and personal information now in the public domain due to this breach. This tells us that hacking is a global problem. Just this week alone, JP Morgan reported a major data breach, as did Dell PC, which affected 49 million users at Dell. Another hacking incident this month occurred at Ascension Health System, where hackers diverted ambulance emergency services and postponed client medical tests. You're free to go read about these cases in articles that I posted on my LinkedIn page, or you can Google search them yourself to read more. The point is that all companies are at risk of hacking, including yours, but you can take preventive measures to avoid being a victim. Here are a few more data breach examples that happened prior to the year 2020. In 2017, Equifax had a data breach and they were fined $575 million. Capital One in 2019 had a data breach. They were fined $80 million. And British Airways in 2018 for a data breach was fined £183 million. Let's talk about 4 types of data breach damages listed here at the top: customer trust, brand reputation, lawsuits, and legal fines. We have a question for the audience. Which breach damage type are you most concerned about? We will send you this question now, and we thank you for answering it. Now let's discuss CVE 2024-1698, today's featured topic. CVE 2024-1698 is a common type of security flaw found in WordPress software. On this topic, I would like to introduce you to my colleague, cybersecurity researcher Cameron Hassan. Cameron will talk more about this vulnerability, and today he will walk us through the exploitation on a sample WordPress website. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you, David, for having me today. All right, so before we start the discussion on CVE 2024-1698, which is the point of discussion of today's webinar, I would like to ask a simple question to our audience. So, what is the difference between a regular SQL injection and a blind SQL injection? I'm just gonna go and raise this question as a poll for the audience, so feel free to answer it. All right, so let's straight away dive into this critical security vulnerability CVE 2024-1698, which was recently discovered in one of the most popular WordPress plugins called Notification X. We will go through all these points one by one to understand what this vulnerability was all about and why we really need to discuss these things to protect our systems from getting exploited by threat agents. But first, let's start with the very basics, like what security vulnerabilities actually are. For the audience of our for the segment of our audience who is who is not very familiar with it, so our question is, what are security vulnerabilities? So mistakes happen even in the process of building and coding technology. If someone says he has coded a piece of software and he hasn't made any mistake while doing so, then he's probably living in denial, right? And what's left from these mistakes is commonly referred to as a bug. While bugs aren't inherently harmful, but many can be taken advantage of by nefarious actors to force software to act in ways which it's not intended to. And these bugs, which can be taken advantage of by threat agents, are known as vulnerabilities. Or in other technical words, we can say a security vulnerability could be a weakness or a flaw or even an error found within a security system, within a piece of software that has the potential to be leveraged by a threat agent in order to compromise a secure network like your organization's network. Right. So now we have a basic understanding of what security vulnerabilities are. Let's move on to the point of discussion that we have today, which is WordPress and its plugin Notification X. And those of you who do not know what WordPress is, it's basically one of the most popular and powerful tool to build websites. Just to give you some context of its popularity, as of today, as of 2024, there are about 1.98 billion total websites on the web, and more than 835 million sites use WordPress. So almost 42% of the website that exist over the internet today are actually powered by WordPress. I think these stats can give us a good impression of its popularity, right? And moreover, if we talk about this WordPress plugin Notification X, in which the vulnerability CV 2024-1698 was recently discovered, it's a quite famous WordPress plugin. It actually helps WordPress website owner boost uh, conversions with features like social proof notifications and sales pop-ups. And we can see over here on the right side of this panel, we can see these are the live stats. These are the latest stats, which is mentioned on their website. So there are like 20,000 plus active installations out there of this plugin, right, as of today, as we speak. So this gives us an impression of how big the scope of this exploit could be, how many websites needs to be patched just because of this vulnerability was discovered, right? So, so we have discussed what WordPress is and what Notification X plugin is. So now it's time to get into details of this vulnerability called CV 2024. So if I go to this NIST website for this vulnerability details, we can see that uh, this vulnerability made it so easy to exploit all these websites that are using this plugin or using the vulnerable version of this plugin, Notification X. And how it was able to actually make these websites vulnerable. So it's basically CV 2024-1698 is basically a SQL injection vulnerability it resides in all the versions of Notification X plugin prior to 2.8.3. So, and why is that so? It So, what does it mean? So, that means if you are a business owner who has an active WordPress site for his business and you are using any prior version of this plugin Notification X, then you are at risk of getting your whole site compromised by threat agents. So, threat agents can actually exploit this vulnerability on your site and actually compromise your whole website, and you can lose. You can get a lot of complications because of that, right? So, and if we look into details of this, we can see that this vulnerability allows attackers to perform SQL injection via the type parameter. So by the type parameter in some of the API that this plugin exposes due to improper handling of the input supplied by the user. And what could be the implications of this vulnerability? So if attackers can perform SQL injection, this means attackers can exploit this vulnerability to extract sensitive information from the database, like even like admin credentials. So nothing would be able to stop them.
Cameron, I have a question for you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So how long has this CVE vulnerability been exploited in the wild?
All right, so to answer that question, so David, all the versions of Notification X plugin prior to 2.8.3 are actually vulnerable to this vulnerability, CVE-2024-1698. So which means if we can go over to the official website of Notification X and check their change log, uh, we can see that this patch update, the version 2.8.3 in which the patch was released for this against this vulnerability was published on 25th of February 2024, and this plugin has been in the market for almost 4 years. So which means we can infer that for almost 4 year attackers were this vulnerability was being exploited in the wild. All right, so I hope that answers your question. All right, let's end the verbal explanation of CVE 2024-1698 here and show something interesting to the audience here that is present here. Let's perform a proof of concept attack to see how easily exploit agents can exploit this vulnerability in the real world. And to perform such a proof of concept attack, we will first need to build a local environment, which since we cannot exploit any publicly hosted website without their consent, right? And for that purpose, we have already prepared and we have already hosted a WordPress website with a vulnerable version of Notification X installed over it. And here we can see this is the website that we have hosted. This is a WordPress website. It's powered by Notification X plugin. And if we go to WP admin, we can see the admin panel of the WordPress site here. But but in order to actually log into the admin panel and compromise the whole admin panel of this website, we will need admin credentials. And how can we do that? We will simply try to exploit the same vulnerability that we have been discussing so far, CVE 2024-1698, in order to actually extract these admin credentials from the database without actually having the right access to it. But before we perform our full-scale attack to steal sensitive information like admin credentials from the database, uh, we will first try to check if the vulnerability CVE 2024-1698 is actually present in the WordPress site that we have hosted here on our local environment. And how can we do that? Because we actually first need a confirmation before we start launching our full-scale attack to actually try to get these admin credentials. So for that confirmation, what we can do is we can try performing simple SQL injection using the type parameters value in the payload. As mentioned here, the type parameter is according to this description of this vulnerability. The type parameter of this plugin or in versions 2.8.2 and all those prior versions are vulnerable to SQL injections. What we can do is we can try performing some simple SQL injection using this same type parameter. So this will let us know if the type parameter is actually vulnerable to SQL injections or not. Because if it is, then only we will be able to move ahead with our full-scale exploit to steal sensitive information from the database. Which in today's webinar, we are actually interested in the admin credentials, so we can actually exploit the whole admin panel of this website. So let's go ahead and I will try to jump to my terminal. So, all right, so if you look at this request that I'm about to send here we are trying to inject this SQL code in the type parameter value of this API wp-json slash notification x slash v1 slash analytics. So this is the API that notification x plugin exposes when you install it on your website, on your WordPress website. And here you can see in the payload, there are two parameters that we are sending. The first one is NXID, and I'm just sending an arbitrary value here. But the second one is an interesting parameter. We already know that this is this is actually vulnerable to SQL injections. So what we can do is we can go ahead and try to inject this SQL code in this type parameter, and we can just send this request. So what will happen? So if you try to understand what will happen in this case, why we are doing this, we need a confirmation that this parameter is actually vulnerable to SQL injection or not, right? So what we can do, what in this query is happening is checking if the version of the database equals to 5. Then it says make the system sleep for 10 seconds. So it will run the sleep command with 10 seconds in the argument. And so the expected output should be, it should take at least 10 seconds to respond. This API should take at least 10 seconds to respond. And let's go ahead and send this request. Check this out. So we are getting our response in 10.05 seconds, which shows we were able to successfully inject our SQL code into a database server by exploiting this type parameter. And just to get another confirmation, let's go ahead and change the logic a little bit. Let's say instead of 5, if the version of the database is 4, then sleep for 10 seconds. Oh, so you can see it didn't make the system sleep, because in this case, the version was starting from 5. But how is this happening? Why is this running our SQL queries? Because we are able to, so this means we are able to actually perform SQL injections on the database just by providing these SQL queries in the type parameter of this API. And this API is a public API, so this was not supposed to actually inject any SQL code and run any SQL code that has been provided in the value of this type parameter because it's not an authenticated request, right? All right, so now we have a confirmation. Now we are good to go because we have a confirmation that this type parameter of this API is actually vulnerable to SQL injection as described in CVE-2024-1698. So now what we can do, we can actually go ahead and perform our full skill tag to actually try to steal the admin credentials like the username and the password here, because that's what we need to log in, right? So for that purpose, we have already prepared an exploit script. We can go ahead and execute that script by saying exploit script.py. Let's go ahead and execute it. So this will take a little bit time. In the meanwhile, what we can do is we can go ahead and see what's happening in the exploit script in the background. So let me try to explain this. So what this exploit code is doing is trying to steal the administrator's username and password hash. It is iterating over all the possible characters like letters, numbers, symbols, one by one. And for each character, it sends a specially crafted request to the plugins API, just like we did here, right? And this request includes a SQL code that checks if the current the current character that it is iterating over matches a character in the username or password hash stored in the database. For user equals to 1, here you can see there's a clause called where ID is equals to 1 in the WordPress user table. And why are we interested only in those users whose ID is equals to 1? Because we already know that the first ever user in the WordPress users table is usually the admin user, because that's how it works. When you try to install WordPress for the first time, you first actually log into it, and you are the sole you are the first user, and you have the administrators, right? So we already know whose ID, the user whose ID is equals to 1 is would be an admin user, right? So we can infer that. And once we have the credentials of that user whose ID is equals to 1, we can just go ahead and log into the admin panel just like that. So what happens in case of match? So it knows if there's a match, the database query takes a longer time to respond due to an extra delay. Here you can see if there's a match, it says sleep for the seconds in the delay variable. Delay variable is mentioned over here, 0.3 second. So what will happen? It will check if the sleep time, uh, if this API call is taking an extra delay in this to respond, then it means that current guess which it is iterating over is actually present in the admin username or the password hash, right? And that is how it can build this whole username and password hash by character. And here you can see it has already finished, and it has found out the admin username and the password hash. So now what? We already know the username is now WHL. So we can go ahead and see WHL. But what about the password? We have got the password hash, but we do not have the original password. So what we can do, because we cannot just pass this password hash into the password field, because that's not how it will work, because all the password in the WordPress table are first hashed and then saved in the database. All right. So what we can do to actually find out the original password, we can use a technique called brute forcing. So what brute forcing does is it will take. So what we are going to do is we will brute force a list of passwords and see if we get any match of this password hash that we have just found out. For that, we will use a tool called Hashcat, and we have already prepared a list of potential passwords that we think could be a match for the original password of this password hash. So the list is called docu.txt. So it's a long list. Here you can see it. And yeah, I'm just cancel this process here. And we will store the password hash that we have just found out using the exploit script in this file hash.txt. I've already done that. Here it is. And now what we can do is we can use hashcat to perform this brute forcing. Okay. So what this command is doing is saying hashcat -am 400. 400 means it will use the same hashing algorithm that WordPress uses, and we will provide the file which contains our password hash, and we will provide our list of potential password, the word list, which is rockU here. And we can say, show us the password if there's a match. Okay. So let's see if we have any matches here. All right. So this says that this password pass3210 and @ is actually a match for this password hash that we have provided him. So what does it mean? If we try to hash this string in this using the same hashing algorithm that WordPress uses to hash its passwords, then it will match this password hash that our exploit script has generated us. All right. So what we have now, we have the original password. So nothing is gonna stop us and to log into the admin panel. Let's go ahead and see if we can actually log in. All right, so we were successfully able to log in, and now we have complete access to the admin panel. We can see all the information of all the users if the site has any, and we can even go ahead and escalate our attack, and we can actually install a malicious plugin on this website to actually try to get a reversal on the server on which this website is hosted, or so the possibilities from here are endless for the attackers, from the attacker's perspective. So now we have complete access, and now this whole website has been compromised. And why we were able to do it? We were just able to do it because of the simple SQL injection vulnerability CVE-2024-1698 that was present in the vulnerable version of Notification X. So in our case, we are using 2.8.2, and we know that all the versions of Notification X plugin prior to 2.8.3 are vulnerable to SQL injection. And by exploiting that, we were able to actually compromise the whole website. So if you are a business owner, what we can do is, yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, Cameron, sorry to interrupt. I had another question for you. So
Yeah, sure.
once a hacker invades a company's server system, like the demonstration you showed now, how difficult is it to purge or fix the damage caused by the hacking?
So, David, the difficulty of fixing damage from a hacker's intrusion varies based on various factors like breach, extent, and detection time. So, early detection and robust incident response ease the process, obviously. However, if the data is compromised, cleanup becomes complex and time-consuming. So, the whole remediation process involves steps like patching vulnerabilities, removing unauthorized access, restoration of the data, and even enhancing security measures. So, we won't get compromised again, right? I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
So that was it from my part. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask it.
Thank you, Cameron, for your demonstration today of conducting real-time ethical hacking on a WordPress website demo. So what are the benefits of ethical hacking? We have 4 listed here today. The first is improved security. Ethical hackers can help organizations identify and address vulnerabilities in their systems and networks. This allows companies to protect their sensitive data and assets. The second is compliance. Ethical hackers can help organizations comply with regulatory requirements and industry standards for data security. The third is cost savings. By proactively identifying and addressing vulnerabilities, organizations can avoid the costly consequences of data breaches and reputational damage. The last is identify overlooked vulnerabilities. Ethical hackers can identify and report vulnerabilities that traditional security measures may have overlooked. We have another question for the audience. Which cybersecurity benefits are you most interested in? We will send you this question, and we thank you for answering it. Let's now discuss the benefits of certification by using ethical hackers. Let's discuss 3 of the most common certifications. The first is PCI DSS compliance. PCI is a global security standard for organizations handling payment card data, aiming to protect cardholder information and reduce fraud. PCI penetration testing plays a pivotal role in achieving PCI compliance by helping organizations identify and remediate security vulnerabilities in their internal and external networks and systems. With a proper penetration test methodology in place, organizations can maintain PCI compliance and ensure the security of their cardholder data environment. The second certification is SOC 2 compliance. SOC is an acronym which stands for System and Organization Controls, and the controls refer to a series of standards that measure how well a given service organization regulates and conducts its information. Organizations that are managing data in the cloud need to be SOC 2 compliant. This will show their customers that they care about their data, and that will bring in more customers in return. From data such as email addresses to sensitive financial information, users expect organizations to properly manage their data. SaaS providers with SOC 2 certification are more trusted by clients than those that don't have the certification, because certification shows a commitment to data security. Finally, companies with plenty of data to handle will more likely choose SOC 2 compliant SaaS providers to work with. Our third certification topic is HIPAA compliance. HIPAA compliance is a part of a certification process required by operating healthcare companies. HIPAA compliance includes protections of electronic data and protected health information known as EFI. And protected health information is covered by the HIPAA security rule in addition to other HIPAA requirements. Penetration testing plays an integral role in HIPAA compliance. While HIPAA doesn't necessarily require you to affirmatively validate your controls, it does require that healthcare organizations protect against reasonably anticipated hazards and threats, including hackers. So what is White Hat Labs and what do we do? White Hat Labs is an offensive security testing company. We discover security weaknesses before hackers do. We help company managers, owners, and executives assess the risks of outside threats. We do this by providing red teaming and penetration testing, which I will discuss in a minute, that are essential in discovering how resilient your system is against cyber attacks by outside hackers. Our team works directly with your team using our extensive security expertise to help research, detect, fix, and ultimately resolve all cybersecurity issues. Our goal is to be an extension of your security team to discover sources of risk, secure, and defend your organization. Overall, we give you an X-ray into your organization's security posture. So what are the offensive security services provided by White Hat Labs? We offer two basic services. The first is a penetration test, also known as pen test, which involves a set of ethical hackers who are asked to perform security testing of an organization's IT infrastructure, including hosts, application, and networks, with no element of surprise. The second security service is a red teaming engagement, which goes one step further and appends social engineering with an element of surprise. The red team test aims to test the organization's threat detection and incident responsibilities. A red team test replicates a cyber attack in real time, and your organization can then assess its own ability to identify the threat and measures taken to remove the threat and minimize any damage. Now I'm open to taking questions